Good morning, everyone. This video is intended to be humorous. I'm laughing at myself here. I am in no way laughing at somebody with medical conditions. I just wanted to put that out there because, sometimes people read sarcasm wrong, and I don't want this to be a poor reflection on somebody that's suffering with medical conditions that thinks I'm poking fun at anybody. I am not. I am poking fun at myself. First and foremost, I am Gen X. We were told, rub dirt on it, okay? I have a very high threshold of pain. Not only was I born in a time period where we had, third-degree sunburns without medical attention, and we were told to rub dirt in our wounds, but I also grew up on a farm. Anybody out there that grew up on a farm knows what I'm talking about. You have a natural disposition to pain tolerance. Let's go back to Wednesday, July 8th, 2026. I'm sitting outside, enjoying the fresh air, about to have a cold drink, when somebody in my household informs me that they just had very bad diarrhea. Now, I'm not trying to be gross, but that's a factual matter. That's what people suffer from. And right now, with all the weird parasites and everything going around, I think it's appropriate to mention that word. Okay. Having said that, I did not have that problem at all. But about an hour later, as I'm sitting there, I noticed my neck started hurting severely, like the worst pain I've ever had in my life. Now, let me give you a backstory here. I suffer from neck and back problems. I'm no stranger to it. Usually, though, it's more of a nerve problem. Like it might go down one side of my shoulder. This was right directly in the middle of my neck, in the back. And it was like I had slept on it wrong, but I wasn't asleep. I was sitting here wide awake. I'm like, what's going on with my neck? And it hurt. It was excruciating. So I'm like, this is strange. I took some Advil. Later, I went to sleep. I woke up in excruciating pain. I couldn't move my body or my neck. I was kind of frozen, okay? And if you've ever suffered from neck and back problems like I do, you know the feeling. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I hope you never experience it. So I'm sitting here and I'm hardly moving and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a bad day. Then the diarrhea hit me. I was just glad I didn't have vomiting issues because that would have made it worse. Think about it, stiff neck, vomiting. Yeah, no, those don't go together. But the diarrhea was bad enough and it lasted all day. I hardly had an appetite. I was nauseous. That night, I'm sitting up in bed and the pain was dire. Oh, it hurt so bad. But it was not nerve pain. It was not bone pain. It was definitely like a muscle pain, but it felt like I slept on it wrong. That's really honestly how it felt. So, of course, I start looking it up on Google, which is always a mistake. I shouldn't do that. And come to find out, long COVID sufferers have this kind of pain. And I thought, oh, great. Here I go again with another COVID infection. So honestly, that's what I thought it was. As the days went by during last week, it kind of got better a little bit. The diarrhea was one day. The next day I was fine. But the nausea remained and the stiff neck remained. So I had that all week. Saturday I had things to do. That's when a lot of people get errands done, including myself. And I had things to do. And I was sitting on that couch and it was making me mad because my neck hurt. So I'm sitting here watching YouTube videos because I was enjoying my morning breakfast. And lo and behold, a video came on from the actual news. Not around here. It wasn't local news. But the video said there was a listeria outbreak. And I'm sitting here, dummy me, I don't know what listeria is. So I'm going, what is listeria? So once again, I went to Google. Shouldn't do that. I go to Google and I find out that there's a listeria outbreak and it's caused from certain foods. Now, this particular outbreak was caused at a buffet or something. But then when I started reading the food list, lo and behold, I had just bought this new cheese that was on the recall list. I was never notified by the store. I had been enjoying it all week. I started eating it before the diarrhea in my household and before the neck pain. And I said, oh my goodness, I've eaten bad cheese. I quickly got the cheese out of the fridge, made sure it was the identical one on the food recall, and it was, even the same brand. I went, oh my goodness. So of course, now I'm panicking. What do I do? So I'm reading Google, and it says, if you ingested food that was possibly contaminated with listeria, go to your local ER urgently, because they can give you oral antibiotics to prevent it becoming meningitis, especially if you have neck pain. Now I'm really freaking out, okay? I'm like, oh my goodness, I have listeria. So then all these thoughts with meningitis start running through my head. I have kids in college. Guess what? They got meningitis shots. I did not. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, what is going on? I now have meningitis. Because you know how it is when you look at Google. Next thing you know, you got all these ailments. So I go to the local ER, not too far away. I guess some places call it an ED now, emergency department. I still call it ER. So I get there and I walk up to the desk, cheese in hand in a bag that says, do not eat, right? Because I didn't want anybody else touching that stuff. And the lady at the desk, a very polite lady, she says, what brings you in today? And I said, I have possibly been exposed to listeria and I have the cheese to prove it. So she said, well, we don't test the cheese. I said, well, that's fine. I just brought it to show you what I'm talking about. She goes, okay, well, what are your symptoms? So I tell her I had diarrhea one day, I'm nauseous, and I have a very bad stiff neck. And she says, okay, well, go have a seat in the waiting room and we'll call you shortly for triage. I'm like, perfect. But my neck hurt so bad, you got to understand, I was shuffling, I wasn't walking right, and I hadn't been all week. So it was kind of concerning. And then the waiting room was packed. I haven't been to an ER in some time. I wasn't expecting that. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. So I make my way to a chair and I sit down. And it was the first closest chair to the bathroom, just in case. Because like I said, I was shuffling, I wasn't walking right, and my neck hurt. So I sit down there, uncomfortably, mind you, and I'm trying to get into a comfortable spot, you know, moving around in my chair, trying to make it more comfortable, and it wasn't. It was a hard chair. Next thing I know, the room clears out and I'm the last one. Yes, I'm next. And it had only been like an hour and a half. So I'm thinking, well, that wasn't too bad. An hour and a half wait. I'm next. And then the parade started. One by one, the cars started pulling up out front. Here come the people with the kids. And I'm like, I'm not next. Because kids, rightfully so, always go ahead of adults. That's pretty much a fact. Unless, of course, the adult is having like a heart attack or something. But usually, in my experience, kids always go ahead. I knew I was going to have a bigger wait. So I'm waiting very patiently. Hey, after all, it's just a stiff neck, right? I started contemplating my life. Should I have eaten the dirt instead of rubbing it on it? Maybe I should have eaten it. You know, there are minerals in dirt. And don't do that at home. I'm just being facetious here. But seriously, all these kids come in with their parents. And these poor little kids, I don't know what their ailments were. You know, it's all private. But one by one, the kids start getting called. So I knew I was in for a long wait. Pretty soon, though, the room kind of cleared out again. A woman came in, had a finger cut off. I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm usually okay with blood and everything, but that one I almost passed out at. So I'm sitting there, and that poor woman, she's moaning, she's in terrible pain. Rightfully so, they took her next. I was in total agreement with that. Yes, thank you. Then a bunch of other people come in. Now these people look fine. I'm sitting there, hardly able to get comfortable. I'm not talking. My face is kind of swollen from the lymph nodes. And I'm sitting there in massive, dire pain, okay? These people that came in after me, well, first of all, they were younger. They weren't kids, but they were younger than me. And they looked absolutely fine. I know you can't judge a book by a cover. I know you can't see, you know, somebody's medical condition. I get that. I know that 100%. What I'm saying is, they were talking, they were getting up, moving around, just fine. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there in pain, trying to adjust myself to get comfortable. They took all those people ahead of me. The triage nurse comes out. What brought you in today? I said, well, I told him my symptoms. He said, and you think you have listeria? I said, yeah, I was exposed to it. This is a recalled item. He looks at the cheese. He says, oh, I see here. Yes, it's on the FDA recall list, but it does say that the batch you have should be fine. I said, well, no, no, that's been recalled. I don't want to eat that. I did, and look at me now. He goes, well, if you had listeria, you know, you would be worse off. You would have a very high fever, and you don't even have a fever. I said, I did. Day 2, I did actually have a fever, but it was only for one day. He goes, okay, well, you definitely need to be seen because you do have a stiff neck. But as you see, we're terribly busy here, so I don't know how long the wait's going to be, but please go out and wait in the waiting room. I said, okay, thanks. And I went back out there and I sat down. And at this time, most of the chairs were empty again. So I was just one of few people that were out there now. Next, the parade comes. Car after car after car are parking at the front curb entrance, and they're wheeling people in wheelchairs. These aren't people that normally are in a wheelchair, mind you. There are wheelchairs up in the front lobby there. They were coming in, grabbing them, going, getting the people coming in. There must have been 5 people all in a row wheeled in wheelchairs. I'm in the end seat closest to the bathroom, right? They start running over my toes because they're trying to get down through here to park the wheelchair over in the seating area. There's 2 seating areas here, and I was in the one closest to the front desk. So I thought, oh my goodness. So I tried to get up to move. The pain was excruciating. I was like, oh, it hurts so bad. So I got up, and the people felt bad. They were like, oh, you didn't have to move. And I'm like, I don't like my toes run over, but thanks. And I sat down, and then now the waiting room is standing room only. It was that busy. And I'm like, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm going to be here forever. So another hour goes by. I'm in the waiting room. It's hot. It's not air conditioned. I started to tremble. And I noticed first it was like this, like I'm twitching. My head is going, right? And I'm like, wait, is that really happening? And I couldn't really think if it's really happening or if it was just me. I didn't know. So then I asked, is my head trembling? Yeah, your head is trembling. Oh, dear. Then my body started. My body started trembling. The people across from me are like chatting it up, laughing. Like I said, I'm the one in pain here, and all these people are like acting like they're not even sick or have a problem. So I'm saying to myself, I'm getting upset because I'm like, why haven't I been seen? But all these people that appear to be fine, they're laughing, talking, I'm not, and they're going ahead of me. And it's like, what is going on? So what happened was the couple across from me, they start noticing I'm trembling, and I'm like this now, and now my body's going. My body's going too. So I asked my family member, hey, am I really trembling right now? Yeah, you are. So I tried to move my body because, like I said, I do suffer from neck and back issues. I do get pinched nerves. And I thought, well, maybe it's a nerve pinching out, I don't know. So then my family member heard the nurse. She came to the door where they take you back to a bed, and she called my name. And I said, was that my name? He said, yes. He stood up. And he waved to her to let her know I was right there because I'm walking slowly, right? She watches me. I saw her, blonde woman. She watches me. People part the way because it's standing room only. People moved wheelchairs. People moved their bodies for me so I could shuffle by, right? I get to the doorway. The lady's gone. And I'm like, I could swear she called my name. He's like, no, she did. Okay. So then people started coming from little alleyways in the emergency room, and they're asking me, what are you doing here? And I said, I just heard my name called. And they're like, no, you didn't hear your name called. Nobody called your name. And my family member was like, yes, they did. I even waved to the blonde nurse. It was a blonde lady that was here with ponytail, and she called her name. We've been waiting here for hours and hours. So they called security. Security comes over. Nobody called your name. I said, well, I'm sorry. I've been waiting here for hours. Maybe I'm delusional. I thought somebody called my name. He's like, no, you need to go back to the waiting room and sit down. So at this point, now I'm mad because I'm like, I have been here for hours. This is ridiculous. Plus, my body was so hot. I was soaked. Okay. The pain was unbearable. My blood pressure when triage took it was off the charts. They didn't even address that. So now I go walking back to my seat. It's taken, and even more people have come in. And now there's 2 more wheelchairs right there at the desk checking in. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't take this. So I walked past the desk and I walked to where the door slides open by itself. That either takes you out or it takes you into a different hallway where you can go get blood work and things. So I walked out into like the foyer area where it became a fork. You can either go to blood work or go out. And I stood there, and that was hotter. That didn't have any air conditioning at all or any air circulation at all. And it was hotter, and I was getting all wound up. And I'm like, forget it, I'm going home. My family member's like, no, you have to be seen. He's like, you're actually turning purple. I'm like, no, I'm going home. This is ridiculous. I'll just put some dirt on it. I'm going home. He's like, no, don't you dare. Now, people in the lobby, not the lobby, I'm sorry, people in the waiting room are starting to get mad. They're like, please tell her to come back and sit. They want me to sit. And I'm like, no, this is me. I don't want to take up anybody else's chair. I never think of myself. You know what I'm saying? I'm thinking about everybody else. Those people have sicknesses too. So I'm like, no, don't worry about me. I'm fine. I started flopping like a fish. My arm, it was as if I was having a seizure. And I have had a seizure once before. So I thought, that's it. I'm having a seizure, right? Somebody came out. They looked like an orderly. And I said to them, excuse me, I've been waiting here for a long time. Now, like, I can't even talk right, you know? And the guy's like, are you okay, miss? I'm like, nah. So my family member said, she's been waiting here for hours. This isn't right. She didn't come in like this. She got worse. He says, hold on, let me get a nurse. This nurse comes around the corner. She's like, hi, honey, how can I help you? I said, I've been getting worse since I was, you know, and I'm almost like on the ground. She's like, oh my goodness. So she leads me into the other hallway where you go get blood work. And she says, have a seat, because it was air conditioned in there. You know, so I sit down, and now other people start yelling at me because they're down in that wing, and they're like, what are you doing in here? Go back to the emergency room. So the nurse said, no, let her sit down. Something's going on. I got to go get the medical team. So the medical team races in. By this time, I'm like nearly unconscious. I couldn't open my eyes. My mouth was so dry, it literally felt like I had been chewing hay, and I had popped a piece of gum called Pure. I don't know if you're familiar with that gum. I chew it sometimes. I'm not a really big gum chewer. I'm allergic to certain things, so I eat that gum Pure when I want to chew a piece of gum. So I popped that in my mouth to keep my mouth moist because there was no water. So I'm sitting there flopping like a fish, literally flopping like a fish. That's what it looked like. And I couldn't talk, couldn't open my eyes. They're coming over like a team of people. I don't even know how many because I couldn't see them. And they wheel me directly into a doctor's office. First time that ever happened. I'm in the doctor's office. It's all cramped. My toe actually got caught on the door jamb. So they pull me in there, and he's like giving me a neurological exam. I couldn't pass it. I couldn't smile. They told me to smile. I was like this, literally, with my arm flapping around and my body jolting. And he's like, stop moving. I couldn't stop moving. So I'm like, okay, arm, stop moving, you know, and then this side starts going. He's like, oh my goodness. So he calls for a higher level of care. I didn't know what all that meant. I'm not in the medical field. The higher level of care team raced in at that moment. I don't even know what was going on. My eyes were shut. But they raced me down to a room. They stripped my clothes off, put me in a hospital gown, threw me in a CAT scan machine. And then they did one with the dye. And then they raced me back to a room, a private room, at the end of this long ER where I guess it's a heart wing. I didn't know. I didn't have my eyes open. I was half unconscious. So I'm back in that room, and the triage nurse himself comes back in. And he's telling the doctor she was not like this when she came in. She just had a stiff neck because now he's got to answer to them as to why I had to sit out there and wait all that time and got to the point where I'm so worse off now. And he was explaining, look, she came in with a stiff neck. We had some serious people in there. A lady cut her finger off. A lady had no blood pressure. You know, there were children. We had to put them first. He goes, she just had a stiff neck. I didn't think it was serious. So the doctor said, this is a potential stroke. Now I'm like high alert, flopping like a fish. What? Stroke? Oh my goodness, right? I didn't know what was going on. Now I'm really panicking. They got me hooked up to every monitor you could think of. They got me hooked up to the EKG stickers that go from the top of your shoulders all the way to your feet. They got them everywhere. I had an IV in each arm, and they were drawing blood out of my hand. That hurts. You know what I'm saying? That hurts when they do that. Or your feet. I've never had the foot one, but ooh, that looks painful. So anyway, I'm all, you know, wired up and everything. And I can tell that my blood pressure is not normal. For me, it was high. But I figured, well, I'm in pain. Plus, the stress of this situation, you know? So eventually, another lady came in like an hour and a half later, and she took more blood. And she said, we have to look at your heart enzymes. I'm like, what are you doing? And I was still not talking right at this point. And all I wanted was some water. My mouth was so dry, okay? Finally, a nurse came in, gave me a little tiny sip of water, but it helped. I felt like I was in a desert. So what happened was the doctor eventually came in, and he said, all of your scans, all of your blood work. I guess they did every single blood work you can imagine. Normal. I'm like, that's great news. Okay, I can go home now. Because that's how I am. You know, I didn't want to tie up a bed that somebody else needed. I'm fine. So he's like, no. You're not going home. You're going to the hospital. We're admitting you. I said, no, you're not. My arm is still flapping, but not as bad as it was. Okay. Now I can actually open my eyes. They also gave me a bag of IV fluids, so I was actually feeling better. I said, I'm fine, doctor. I'm actually fine. So then they start asking, do I have Parkinson's? No. Did you take something like drugs? No. Did you do something in the waiting room? I had a piece of gum. It has nothing in it. It's called Pure. I said, I chewed it because my mouth was dry, but I've never had a reaction. I've been chewing that gum for years. I've never had a reaction to it. So the doctor says, okay, well, we did see some things that should be looked at with an MRI, but you're fine. You're overall, everything is good. So I said, then why do I need an MRI? Because now I'm thinking dollar signs in my head. MRI? What? Are you kidding me? I'm not going to the hospital. I got cats. I don't want to go to the hospital where I can't pet my cats. Come on now, you know? So the doctor was like, you need to go to the hospital. I said, no, I'm not. I'm going home. I said, it's not my first rodeo with medical ailments, okay? I know my body. I'm fine. The tremor, the convulsions, whatever it is, they're calming down. I'm going to be good. He's like, this is against medical advice. Don't care. I said, hey, look, I appreciate you. I appreciate the team. I appreciate everything you've done for me, but it's not my first rodeo. I've been hospitalized many times. I've had many surgeries. This is the icing on the cake for me. I didn't come in here because I was having a stroke. I came in here because I think I was exposed to listeria. I said, did you test my blood for that? He's like, we don't do that here. You don't test for listeria here? He said, no. So, well, they could have told me that when I checked in instead of having me wait out there, you know. So then he said, I really highly advise that you go to the hospital. And I said, no, I'm not. He's like, you're okay going home with a tremor? I'm like, yes, I am. He's like, okay. I said, I've had it before. When I was paralyzed, I had a tremor. I have problems with my neck, bones, my nerves, my spinal cord, okay? I already know my body. I know what my body does. I know what ailments I have. I'm gonna be fine. Apparently, when I had walked out into that foyer area where it forks, I had become like really, really red and purple everywhere, and I was blotchy, and they all saw that. That was one of their main concerns. That was gone. They had put me in an air-conditioned room with the IV fluid, and it actually made it a lot better. And I felt better, like I said. So I was like, no, I'm not going to go to the hospital. I don't see any reason to warrant it. He's like, I'm telling you to. I said, I know, and I appreciate it. But the thing is, you said I was fine. You can't tell me I'm fine and then tell me I need to go to the hospital. It doesn't work that way with me. So he said, okay. He said, I don't know if you're having a stroke. I said, you just told me I'm fine. He goes, listen, the CAT scan doesn't show everything. There are things that an MRI can see clearer, and you may need that to diagnose what's going on. And I said, but I came in here with a possible listeria contamination. You didn't even check me for that. And I said, the triage nurse said I don't have meningitis because I don't have a fever, so I want to go home. And he said, I don't know that you don't have meningitis. But I could touch my chin to my chest, which is a test, and it was just a stiff neck. So I said, so what are you saying, that I could have meningitis? He's like, I don't know. And I said, am I having a heart attack? He said, not right now, but that doesn't mean you can't walk out the door and have one. I said, okay, you know what? I'm going home. And if I get worse, I'll call 911. I just need to go home right now. So he said, I can't hold you against your will. I strongly advise you not to do that. And I signed the medical waiver and said, I'm going home. So he sent me home. And again, if you have medical issues, this is not advocating for you to get up and walk out of the hospital against medical advice. I'm saying what I did because I know my body and I've been through things before. Was it smart? No, I should have stayed. But I have been in the hospital in the past. I hate it, okay? This, I felt, was, if the CAT scan was clear, if the blood work was clear, I was fine. So I left. I got home, I was still tremoring a little bit, but after a while, the tremors completely stopped. And I said to myself, it's because of the spinal cord problem I have. You see, I was born with a mild birth defect. I don't have the worst of it. I have the very mild of it. And it's bone fusion in my neck. And what happens is it kind of like pinches the spinal cord sometimes. It compresses it. The spinal cord is narrowed in my body because of this birth defect. So what happens is I get tremors. I get pinched nerves often. I've had physical therapy for it in my lifetime. I've seen a chiropractor. I've had a slew of medical things because of it, okay? So this is not my first rodeo with something like this. I know my body, and I know my body well enough to know I was scrunched up on a hard chair for hours. So it's reasonable to think that's what happened. My spinal cord got pinched while I was sitting there, and that's what made me start convulsing, basically. And sure enough, when I read the report later as it came in, it did say that it could have been from the spinal cord problem, okay? So it did say that. So don't get mad at me. If you're sitting out there yelling at me on the TV going, you should have went to the hospital. I know, because other people have said that to me. And I get it. I understand your concern. And like I said, I'm not telling people to not go to the hospital, okay? I'm just saying that's what I did because I was fed up at this moment. I needed to get home and pet a cat. Sunday, I actually felt better. The neck pain was still there, but I did feel a little better. So Monday morning, I actually had a doctor's appointment already scheduled because just a short while ago, I uploaded a video talking about how my doctor prescribed some medication and she's following up with me about that for my cholesterol. So now I have an appointment Monday. And I thought, well, if she thinks that I need to go to the hospital or need an MRI, she'll let me know. As I was getting ready that morning, she calls and says, I need you to come in early. So I just naturally assumed she read my medical chart from Saturday from the hospital, the ER at the hospital. So I thought, okay, well, she's probably going to be mad that I didn't go to the hospital. She's going to have questions. Of course she is, you know. I get to her office. My daughter drove me. We get there. And my daughter was really upset with me that I didn't go to the hospital. She thought it was foolish. She said, you know, you could have had a stroke. And I was like, I know, honey, but I know my body. I'm Gen X. I can't explain it otherwise. You know, we just know these things. So I went in to her office and she walked in and she told me that from the blood work she ran prior, everything looked great. My LDL was down at least over half of what it was. Everything was looking good. And she was really complimenting me and praising me. So I said, I know you're probably upset that I didn't go into the hospital. Let me just explain. I didn't go there because I was having a stroke. I went there because I had a possible listeria infection. So she just looks over at me like, what? I said, well, I thought that's why you called me in early. She said, no, I want to hit the gym at lunch. So I thought if I moved you up, I could have time to go to the gym. I said, oh, sorry about that. She's like, what do you mean you went to the ER? She goes, I didn't see an alert come over my screen. Hang on. So she goes to the computer and she starts entering stuff in there and she sees that the ER report is there. She looks at me in total annoyance, which I expected. And she said, give me 5. She leaves the room and she's stern. I'm kind of afraid of her, to be honest. And she comes back in and she goes, what were you thinking? Of course, my daughter pipes up. Yeah. I said, listen, okay, I know my body. I think that I started convulsing or whatever that was because of the nerves in my neck being compressed because of the way I was sitting in the hard chair and I wasn't really moving and I was crunched up for like 3 hours. And she goes, I see that in the report. She goes, that could be an explanation. But I did have signs of infection. I had some swollen lymph nodes in my abdomen, and I also had some indications that I could have something else going on that would suggest I need an MRI. She goes, you know, I think it was very foolish of you not to go to the hospital because from here, there's not much I can do on an emergency basis. She goes, it's going to take a long time for you to get an MRI. I said, I don't want one. I'm fine. The CAT scan said I was fine. She goes, but listen, the CAT scan can't show the detail an MRI can show. I said, I'm fine. I don't care. I'm getting better. I'm fine. I don't have the tremor anymore. I'm good. She goes, I don't disagree that it could have been a listeria infection, but the only way to test for sure is a spinal tap. Oh, no. No, I'm good. No, I'm good. I'm not doing that. And my daughter's over there like huffing and puffing. If the doctor says, and I'm like, stop it. I am not doing that. Okay. I've never done that and I'm not doing that now. I hear it's very painful. If I felt like I needed that, I would have done it. The problem is I'm not up for pain today, okay? So I told her that. I said, look, I respect you. I respect your opinion. I respect your advice. But I'm not doing that today. I'm in a good mood. So she says, I'm going to refer you to an infectious disease specialist in case you have listeria. I said, no, I'm getting better. I'm fine. I didn't have a very strong form of it anyway. It's pretty much gone. Oh, and they did give me some of that anti-nausea medicine in the hospital in my IV. So I'm no longer nauseous. She goes, I really highly suggest you go get an MRI. And she goes, it's going to take a long time to get that. So why don't we start with an infectious disease specialist? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm good. She goes, so you're refusing medical advice again? Yes. She goes, I don't really think that's smart. And I said, I know you don't, but that's my body. And I'm telling you, I don't want any of that. She goes, well, then what can I help you with? What is your main chief problem today? I said, my main problem is I still have a stiff neck. The stiff neck has gotten better and I have more range of motion, but it's not completely better. It still hurts. So like I can't bend over properly. I shuffle when I walk. I'm not myself, and it's been almost a week now. She goes, okay, well, have you ever had muscle relaxers? I said, no. I said, can't you just prescribe an antibiotic? She goes, no, we don't do that. You have to go get these tests to do that. She felt that this was going to be safe. It was only 5 milligrams. And I said, okay, I'll take it. The one piece of advice she gave me was do not operate heavy machinery while taking this medication. It's going to make you drowsy. The doctor said, okay, you know what? I don't feel comfortable with this. I'm going to prescribe these muscle relaxers. And I am going to see you back next week, in 1 week. And if you are not better, you are going to do what I recommend. And I said, deal. If I'm not better in a week, yes, I will do what you recommend. She goes, okay, because this is making me uncomfortable. I said, but I'm getting better. I don't have the tremor. I have better range of motion with my head and neck. And she's like, okay, I can't force you to do anything. It's your body. You're going against medical advice. I'm going to prescribe the low dose muscle relaxers. Come back next week. My daughter's like, I will bring her. She's coming in next week. I said, of course I am. I'm fine with that. So last night I went home, got the prescription, and I took 1 5 milligram muscle relaxer because it said to take it 3 times daily on the bottle. So I figured, well, I'll take it at night because she said it's going to make me drowsy. So I took it around, 7 or 8 o'clock. I don't even know what time it was. I had a reaction to the muscle relaxer. I didn't need urgent care. I didn't need an ambulance, but it was pretty scary. I've never been on muscle relaxers. So the first thing that happened, within minutes, I felt loopy and I just kind of relaxed back and I really felt good. Like my body felt kind of numb. So I just was like, oh, this is kind of nice. It almost felt like I had a cocktail. That's how it felt. And I don't drink. I used to, but I don't now. So it felt like I had a cocktail in my hand and I was sipping on something good. And I was like, wow, this is some nice stuff. And all of a sudden, though, I couldn't really function. Like I was taking ice out of a cup with a spoon and I could barely hold the spoon. I could barely take a bite of food. I didn't eat all my dinner from earlier because I was still working on it when I took the medication. And then now I'm sitting there and I'm like, ugh. And then all of a sudden it was like I was a puppet. Like I couldn't really move well. And then I couldn't even get up. I had to get up off the couch. I couldn't even get up. It took 2 family members to get me up. I started laughing hysterically. They discovered that some people have this reaction. It was not life-threatening. I didn't go into anaphylactic shock. I didn't have delirium or anything like that. They made the decision that it was going to wear off, and it did. It wore off, but just a precaution, if you've never had muscle relaxers, wow. So I don't know if I'll be taking any more of that. It did help, though. I woke up this morning and I have more range of motion in my neck, so I'm good there. But just so you know, muscle relaxers, whoo. And now I go Monday to see my doctor. But the point I'm trying to make here is I go into an ER because I think I've been exposed to the listeria bacteria. And I come out as a stroke victim. And, it's funny how life throws us curveballs. You walk into a place thinking you have a splinter in your finger and you come out with 50 stitches. It always seems to be the way. It never seems to go as we think. And it's just a really important reminder to all of us that our life here on earth is so limited. It's so short. You know, when I was sitting in that ER, there's a woman with her finger cut off, and yeah, she's moaning and groaning, and it was awful, right? But then there were couples there, there were people there, they were chatting, they were laughing, and my thought process was, why do they need an ER? You know, we have so many medical buildings here. We have a bunch of urgent cares, we have ERs. Now the ER is walk-in, no appointments, okay? But the urgent cares here, we have a massive ton of them. They're all by appointment. You can get an appointment at any one of them any day. They're never completely booked because there's so many of them. If somebody's actually truly talking, walking, laughing, carrying on, please spare the ER. Because from what I witnessed, there were some very, very ill people that needed beds, and they were shoved off to the side so other people could go before them that had less serious problems. It's just a reminder how fragile and precious life is. Take care of yourself.